Let's get straight to the point. A growing number of asset managers, including Grayscale, Bitwise, WisdomTree, and ProShares, have filed for XRP ETFs. ProShares even secured approval for 3 XRP futures ETFs, one of which offers inverse exposure. And now, attention is shifting toward a major player that hasn't filed yet, but might soon, BlackRock. According to Vandell Aljarrah, co-founder of Black Swan Capitalist, BlackRock clearly wants to enter the XRP ETF space. But before we celebrate, he also warns, it might not be the win many XRP investors think it is. So what's really going on here? In a post shared on social media, Aljarrah argues that this move by BlackRock, if and when it happens, won't necessarily benefit crypto in the way people hope. Yes, it might boost legitimacy. Yes, it could attract more institutional money. But here's the catch. An XRP ETF doesn't give you access to XRP's actual utility. Aljarrah says, while the prospect of an ETF might appear to validate XRP in the eyes of Wall Street, it strips the asset of its inherent functionalities. He's talking about the things you can do with real XRP, like instant cross-border payments, liquidity sourcing, and self-custody. None of those are possible if you're holding XRP through an ETF. In that case, you're only getting price exposure. You're not actually holding XRP. And that's a big deal, because it suggests that the growing demand for XRP ETFs is less about building on the technology and more about extracting profit from market movement, without participating in the actual ecosystem. Now, Aljarrah isn't against ETFs completely, but he is cautious. He points out that institutional players often use ETFs not just for investment, but for control. Once crypto assets become part of traditional financial instruments, the power shifts from individual investors to large institutions. In his words, the control over the asset changes significantly. So where does BlackRock stand right now? Interestingly, they haven't filed for an XRP ETF yet. But according to several market analysts, it's probably only a matter of time. BlackRock has already seen massive success with its Bitcoin and Ethereum ETFs, which have reportedly attracted over $43 billion in combined assets. Experts like Nate Geraci from ETF Store say it's unlikely that BlackRock will sit out of the altcoin ETF race much longer. Geraci believes BlackRock won't let firms like Bitwise and Grayscale dominate the space. That means if XRP ETFs continue gaining regulatory support, BlackRock will almost certainly join the fray, and they'll likely do it in a big way. So, what's changed in the regulatory environment that's making all this possible? One major factor is the resolution of the Ripple SEC lawsuit. In July 2023, the court ruled that XRP is not, by itself, a security. And more recently, the SEC decided to drop its appeal and settle with Ripple. That's huge. With that legal uncertainty behind us, institutional interest is rising fast. The SEC has already begun a 240-day review cycle for multiple XRP ETF applications. According to Polymarket, the chance of approval in 2025 has jumped to over 80%. Even the members exchange MEMX, a relatively newer US-based stock exchange, has stepped into the spotlight, proposing to list an XRP ETF modeled after the commodity-based trust structure, just like what we've seen for Bitcoin and Ethereum. Meanwhile, Grayscale is working closely with NYSE Arca to list its XRP trust, and they already manage over $16 million in XRP-related assets. That shows there's demand, even before full regulatory clarity. So let's step back and ask, what does all this mean for the average XRP holder? If you're someone who values XRP's speed, low transaction fees, and real-time use cases, you might want to be cautious about celebrating the rise of ETFs too quickly. As Aljarrah warns, ETFs give you exposure, not control, not utility, and not participation in the XRP ledger's growing ecosystem. And yet, for institutions, ETFs are a safer, more familiar way to enter the crypto market. For them, it's not about using XRP. It's about betting on its price. In summary, BlackRock is not in yet, but industry experts believe it soon will be. Vandell Aljarrah warns that this could reduce XRP's role as a utility asset and increase institutional control. ETF demand is rising fast, especially after the Ripple SEC lawsuit was resolved. Grayscale, Bitwise, ProShares, and others are already positioning themselves. Regulatory approval now looks more likely than ever, with some odds as high as 80% for next year. The takeaway? An XRP ETF might bring attention and capital, but don't assume it brings progress for the ecosystem itself. As with any development in crypto, the benefits and the risks depend on your perspective. Thanks for watching.